Ah, good day, class. And let me welcome you to this very interesting course, GST 104 Use of Library. I'm sure you are going to enjoy every minute of this course. Our topic for today is going to be types of library. So let's get to class and find out what this topic is all about.
Class. As I mentioned earlier, our topic for today is going to be types of library. But before we proceed, let us look at the contents of the topic. We're going to have objectives. We will also talk about the concept of library, history of library, types of library, and then a recap of what we have discussed. So now let's get into it. What are the objectives of this topic? By the end of this presentation, you should be able to define library, describe the origin of library, and then classify library based on their features and their functions. So, what is library? The word library, how does it come to be? The word library is a Latin word, liber, which means book. So therefore, library is an organized collection of resources made accessible to a defined community of users for borrowing, for reading, or referencing. Library can either be physical, that is full walled building, or it can be digital, that is electronic, online, virtual. And the materials can be accessed physically or remotely from a different location if it is a virtual or digital library. Now, when you walk into a physical library, what do you see inside? Yes, you guessed right, books. Yeah, of course, there are books in the library, periodicals, that is journals, newspapers, manuscripts, films, maps, documents, CDs, videotapes, ebooks, and what have you. Now, all these resources that contain information are what we call library collection. So now, let's look at the brief history of library. Now, evidences show that as far back as 2600 years BC before Christ, there exists some form of writing on clay tablets in hieroglyphics. Now, this written archives, this written form of information, marked the end of prehistory, that is, things that happened before history, and they also marked the beginning of history, that is, recorded form of history as we have it now. So let's look at some historical antecedents about the existence of libraries. We said as far back as 2600 years before Christ, there exist libraries. And that is why 1900 years before Christ and 1700 years before Christ, there were evidences of the existence of library classification system. We're going to talk about classification system as we move along, but all you need to know is that classification system offers a logical sequence upon which library resources are processed and displayed in the library. So now let's look at the crux of today's lesson, that is types of library. Basically, we have 5 types of library. We have what we call academic libraries, special or research libraries, school libraries, public libraries, and national libraries. We're going to pick each and every one of them, and you will see their features and their functions and where they are situated. So now, academic libraries. Academic libraries are those libraries that are located or situated in tertiary institutions, academic institutions, such as what? Such as universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. The purpose of establishing these libraries is to meet the information needs of their community. The community in this case constitutes the staff and the students that are working or staying or living within the vicinity of the university. Now, what are the functions, basic functions of academic libraries? One of their functions is that they provide information resources in line with the needs of the staff and the student. This need could be curricular, that is based on the programs that are being offered in the institution. For instance, if you go to a university of agriculture, their library collection is more likely to be centered, to be more focused on, you know, information resources that are related to agricultural science disciplines such as, agricultural economics, agricultural extension and management, horticulture, and other agri-related disciplines. Another function of academic library is the provision of conducive reading environment for both the staff and the students. Let's look at research or special libraries. These are libraries established to cater for patrons with specific and special interests. Special libraries serve an identified group of users with common and special interests. Mostly they are privately owned or funded by organizations that establish them. Now, let me give you a for instance. We have a law library. For instance, in the Faculty of Law, University of Lagos, you're likely to find a law library there. And their collection, because it serves, law lecturers and, lawyers in training, is more likely to be more focused on law literature, case histories, disciplines that have direct and tangential relationship with law, forensic investigations, court proceedings, and what have you. So, what are the basic functions of spatial or research library? One is the provision of information resource to support the activities of the parent organization or owners, and they also have what we call SDI, selective dissemination of information. And as we, said, SDI is a specialized library service that focuses on the individual interest of the members. And that is why the library keeps track of the interests of the members, and in the event that there are new arrivals in the library, new arrivals of information resources, individuals that have interest in such materials are notified via phone calls, SMS, emails, and what have you, that so information item related to their interest is now available in the library. So now the school libraries, as the name indicates, they are those libraries that are established within primary and secondary schools. The main objectives of these libraries is to serve the educational needs of the students, the pupils, and the teachers. And their functions include developing and creating good reading habits in the pupils and providing academic support for the academic activities in the schools. Now, let's look at public libraries. Public libraries are those libraries that are open to everybody and are generally accessible by the public. They are financed by public taxes and operate under the control or under the supervision of local, state, or federal governments. Public library services are usually free because they are funded from the taxpayers' money. And some of the functions of this type of libraries include catering for the social, educational, and recreational needs of their community, that is, the area within which they reside. They also disseminate information resources and preserve it and disseminate it to suit the different needs of the people they serve. Such people could be children. They should have children's section. They have adult section. They have literate section, and then they have those sections that caters for people who cannot read or write. Now, finally, national libraries. National libraries are usually established, funded, and owned by federal governments, and they serve as preeminent repository of information for a particular country. Their collections, that is, the type of information resource they housed, consist of rare and valuable works. Functions of national libraries include, acting as legal depository centers of the nation. By law, any information resource published within a particular country, certain copies of such publications should be deposited with the National Library. They are also responsible for national bibliography and development of bibliographic services. They also serve as bibliographic control centers, whereby they issue national bibliographic publications and then issues related to ISBN and ISSN. Oh yeah, ISBN. ISBN stands for International Standard Book Number, and ISSN stands for International Serial Number. So now, let's recap on what we have covered in today's lesson. We defined library, where we said the word library comes from Latin liber, which means book. So therefore, library means a place, whether physical, four-walled cornered room or virtual digital space, where information resources are made accessible to a defined community of users. We also talk about origins of library, where we said as far back as 2,600 years BC, before Christ, there exists some form of record, some form of writing on clay tablets on hieroglyphics. We also talk about types of library and their functions, where we said we have basically 5 types of library. That is academic libraries, those libraries that are located within academic institutions such as universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. We also talk about special or research libraries, where we said there are those libraries that focus on a particular group with a specialized or specific interest. We also talk about school libraries, where we said there are those libraries that are basically found within primary and secondary schools, and they usually exist to support the academic activities of those schools. We also talk about public libraries, where we said there are libraries that are open to everyone and they provide their services FOC, free of charge. Why? Because they are funded from the public till, from the public purse, from public taxes. And they cater for the information needs of various group of people such as children, adults, literate, and what have you. We also talk about national libraries, where we said there are those libraries that are funded and owned by federal government. They act as repository centers whereby all publications published in that country are by law deposited in such libraries. In Nigeria, we have our own national library called National Library of Nigeria, and it is headed by the National Librarian, Professor Aina, and it is located in the headquarters, that is in Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, though the library has several branches across the states in the Federation. So, I still remain Salisu Shamuel Bala, and my email ID is ssalisu@noun.edu.ng. From me, it is TTFN for now, Tata for now. See you next, and have a wonderful